What if I told you that behind Stevie Wonder's beautiful music and global success was a mother who walked through fire, alone, afraid, and unheard, just to keep him alive? You won't believe what Lula Mae Hardaway had to face. Let me tell you, this is not just a story of a famous singer. This is about a mother who was thrown into the deepest kind of pain and still chose love over everything else. And this is where it gets interesting. The most powerful part of Stevie's story doesn't begin with him, it begins with her. Lula was just a young woman when she left Alabama and moved to Detroit. She wanted a better life. Like many others, she had dreams. She believed that hard work and good intentions would be enough. But life didn't go easy on her. Detroit in the 1950s was cold. Cold in weather, cold in the streets, cold in the hearts of the people she had to deal with. She lived in a small house with barely enough heat, no money, and growing children. Her partner, Calvin Judkins, Stevie's father, was not a kind man. He had a heavy hand and a darker temper. Lula tried to make it work for the sake of her children. She hoped that he would change. But things only got worse. One freezing night, Lula was cleaning up the small kitchen, trying to stretch what little food she had for her kids, when Calvin walked in drunk. He wasn't just loud, he was angry. He tossed a coat at her and said something she didn't understand at first. "There's a man outside," he told her. "He gave me money." "Be nice to him." Lula froze. "Be nice?" she asked, but Calvin's face changed. He came closer, grabbed her arm, and said words that made her knees weak. "You go out there and do what he says," he growled, "or I'll beat you like never before." The craziest part? One of her children, maybe even Stevie, walked in at that moment. Lula's heart broke. She looked into her baby's eyes and forced a calm voice. "Mama will be back in a bit," she said. Then she stepped into the cold, into the hands of a stranger, because her children were hungry. Now this is where it gets darker. That night didn't break her. She came back, held herself together, and cooked dinner for her children with the food she bought from that awful exchange. A full chicken, hot on the table. No one knew what she had just gone through. But here's the shocking part. This wasn't a one-time thing. Calvin started bringing more men. Sometimes he told her to walk the streets herself. It became a silent routine. Lula never told her neighbors. She never screamed. She never cried in front of her kids. What makes this story different? She didn't run. She didn't drink. She didn't give up. While other women on the block were turning to drugs just to numb their pain, Lula stayed strong, sober, for her children. One night, while walking down a new street that Calvin had forced her onto, a large man blocked her path. He told her she was in the wrong area. He warned her not to come back. Most people would have run, but Lula didn't. She looked him in the eye and said something simple but powerful. "My children are hungry. I want coal in my stove. Tell me where your street ends and I'll stay off it." He didn't say a word after that. He just stepped aside. Destiny took an unexpected turn that night, not because the world changed, but because Lula refused to break. She never wanted this life. She didn't choose pain. But every day she faced it, she turned it into strength. She didn't complain, she survived. And every sacrifice she made was for her children, especially for the son who would one day change music forever. Lula thought things couldn't get worse, but they did. Calvin had completely changed from the man she once knew. He no longer treated her like a partner, but like property. He started coming home with more money, but it wasn't from work, it was from selling her pain. And the most heartbreaking part? Lula knew exactly what he was doing, but she had no one to turn to. Her family was far away. The neighbors kept to themselves, and the world outside didn't care what a poor black woman in Detroit was going through. Every day, Lula had to act like things were normal for her children. She still brushed their hair, packed what little food she had, sang songs with them before bed. But behind her eyes, there was a storm. This is how a mother breaks without anyone noticing. She didn't cry often, but when she did, it was always in silence. She waited until the house was asleep. Then she'd sit in the kitchen, rocking herself back and forth, whispering prayers into the dark. But here's the shocking part. One night, Lula finally stood up to Calvin. She told him she couldn't do it anymore, that she wouldn't keep living this way. But instead of listening, he exploded. He threw a glass across the room, hitting the wall just inches from her face. She grabbed the children and locked herself in the bedroom. All night, she held them close, her hands shaking, her heart racing. She knew one day she'd have to leave him, but how? Where would she go? How would she feed her babies? Let me tell you, this is where it gets interesting, because instead of falling apart, Lula began to plan, quietly, carefully. She started saving coins from grocery money, just a few at a time. Sometimes she went without food so her kids could eat and she could save a few cents. She knew freedom wouldn't come easy, but she believed it would come, because deep down, Lula had a fire that not even Calvin could put out. And as fate would have it, that small fire turned into something bigger when she started noticing something unusual about her little boy, Steveland, whom the world would later know as Stevie Wonder. He wasn't like the other kids. He was blind, yes, but there was something more. He had rhythm. He had music in him, even before he could talk properly. Lula would hum tunes while washing dishes, and little Stevie would tap perfectly along on the table. Not just random tapping, he kept the beat, every time. That's when Lula realized, maybe, just maybe, her son was meant for something greater. And maybe, just maybe, her pain wasn't the end of the story. But here's the craziest part. Even as she started dreaming of a better life, Calvin tried harder to control her. He began to use Stevie as leverage. "If you leave," he said one night, "you'll never see your son again." Lula felt like her heart had been ripped out. She knew he was capable of it. He had threatened worse before, but instead of breaking, she grew even more determined. She didn't know how or when, but she promised herself that one day her son would be free. And when that day came, she would never let anyone hurt him again. That promise lived inside her, stronger than fear, louder than the silence she was forced to live in. Because Lula wasn't just surviving anymore. She was preparing for a fight for freedom and for the future. Lula's life wasn't just hard. It was a constant battle for survival. Every single day, she walked the tightrope of trying to protect her kids while being torn down by a man who wanted nothing more than to break her spirit. But even though Calvin kept threatening her, even though he tried to control her every move, Lula never lost sight of her purpose, her children, especially Stevie. One day, she reached a breaking point. Calvin had gone too far again. He had humiliated her in front of the neighbors, thrown things around the house, and accused her of plotting against him. It was a cruel cycle, and Lula knew she couldn't let it go on forever. But what choice did she have? She had no money, no family to turn to, and no job she could rely on. How could she protect Stevie when she was trapped in this hell? Then one day, everything changed. Lula found herself in a situation she couldn't ignore. She had to choose between staying in that toxic house or making a move that would change everything. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about Stevie. She couldn't let him grow up in a world like this. And as if fate was pushing her, one night Calvin came home in an especially violent mood. He was drunk and out of control. Lula's children were in bed, but she could hear them stirring. She knew the fear they were feeling, and in that moment, something inside her snapped. She wasn't going to let Calvin take her kid's future, and she wasn't going to let him destroy her anymore. The craziest part? She walked straight up to him and told him she was leaving. For a second, he laughed, thinking she was just bluffing, but Lula's voice was calm, steady. "I'm not afraid of you anymore," she said. Calvin's face changed. He didn't expect this. He thought she was weak, but Lula wasn't weak, not anymore. She had lived through enough to know that the only way to move forward was to stand up for herself and for Stevie. She packed up her things that night, left behind everything she had known, and took her children to a small, safe place in the heart of Detroit. It wasn't much, but it was hers. It was freedom. And that was all she needed. But this is where it gets interesting. Stevie, the quiet little boy who had watched his mother suffer all these years, finally saw something different in her. He saw strength, and even though he was still young, he knew something was shifting. Stevie began to believe, in his own way, that maybe he could rise above his circumstances too. His music, his gift, was his way out. What makes this part of the story so incredible is that while Lula had been living in pain and fear, she never stopped giving her children everything she had. She worked multiple jobs, doing whatever it took to keep a roof over their heads and food on the table. She cleaned houses, babysat, and worked in factories. She even started saving a little money, just in case Stevie's music might one day take him somewhere. She refused to let him drown in the same misery she had faced, and she was right. Destiny took an unexpected turn when Stevie got the opportunity to perform, and suddenly, people noticed. His incredible talent, his natural rhythm, caught the attention of the right people. But here's the shocking part. Stevie didn't just rise to stardom on his own. His success was rooted in everything Lula had done to protect him. Every sacrifice she made, every tear she wiped away in the middle of the night. When he started performing and people realized how amazing he was, it wasn't just Stevie they were seeing, it was the years of pain and survival that she had given him. He was living proof of everything she had suffered for. Stevie's rise wasn't just a lucky break, it was the culmination of a mother's love and determination to build a future that would lift him out of the darkness. And as Stevie began to climb higher in his career, he never forgot the woman who had made him who he was. He never forgot the woman who had gone through hell to make sure he never had to. Lula's life was no longer about survival. It was about watching her son achieve the impossible and knowing she had helped make it happen. She had turned her pain into power, and the world would soon know it. As Stevie Wonder rose to fame, everything changed. The little boy who once struggled in a house full of pain was now on stages all around the world. He had the fame, the fortune, and the adoration of millions, but none of it would have happened without Lula. And yet, even though Stevie's life was filled with success, it was clear that there was one thing he never stopped cherishing: his mother. Stevie, as a young man, never forgot the nights when Lula stayed up late, sewing clothes, cleaning, and doing whatever she could to make sure he and his siblings didn't go to bed hungry. He never forgot the times she stood tall in the face of danger, showing strength that most people would have never known if they didn't live through it. But Stevie's love for his mother wasn't just about appreciation. It was about respect. He knew that everything he achieved, every note he played, every song he wrote, was because of the woman who never stopped believing in him. And here's the shocking part. When Stevie finally made it big, he promised Lula something she never had: peace. No longer did she need to worry about making ends meet. No longer did she need to struggle. Stevie made sure his mother lived in comfort, far from the dark days they both knew so well. He bought her a home, paid for her medical care, and ensured she was surrounded by love for the rest of her life. Lula didn't have to walk the streets anymore. She didn't have to be afraid. For the first time in her life, she could breathe easy. And, as a mother, that's all she ever really wanted, to see her children safe and happy. But here's where it gets interesting. Lula's legacy wasn't just about the sacrifices she made. It wasn't just about the pain she lived through. Her legacy was about the strength, the dignity, and the love she passed on. It wasn't just Stevie who carried that legacy. Lula's story became a beacon for other women, other mothers, who felt alone in their struggles. It became a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there is power in survival, there is power in pushing through pain, and there is power in never giving up. Lula passed away on July 6, 2008, but her influence lived on in everything Stevie did. Every time you hear one of his songs, you can hear the echo of the woman who made it all possible. "Don't you worry about a thing, pretty mama," he sings in one of his most famous tracks. And we now know he wasn't just talking to his fans, he was talking to her, the woman who had once sacrificed everything to make sure he didn't have to worry about a thing. What makes this story so powerful isn't just the fame that Stevie gained. It's the fact that Lula's sacrifices and her strength were never in vain. She might have been just one woman, but her love, her pain, and her unyielding will shaped the life of one of the greatest musicians the world has ever known. And now, through Stevie's music and through the truth of her own story, she continues to inspire millions, reminding us that no matter how dark life may get, there's always light at the end of the tunnel. Lula's story is one of raw survival, unimaginable sacrifice, and love that never quits. It's a testament to the invisible battles many women fight every day, and it's a reminder that even the toughest struggles can lead to the most beautiful legacies. So, next time you listen to a Stevie Wonder song, remember, you're not just hearing a legend of music, you're hearing the story of a mother's unbreakable love. If this story moved you, if it opened your eyes to a different side of fame, family, and sacrifice, hit that like button right now, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and most importantly, subscribe for more powerful stories like this. Drop a comment below to honor Lula Mae Hardaway. Let her story be a light in someone else's darkness. Thanks for watching, and until next time, stay strong, stay inspired.